Walking home alone from school is something many students experience every day, but sometimes an ordinary walk can turn into a nightmare that stays forever in the memory. In this animated horror story, we follow a quiet, introverted student who always preferred walking home instead of taking the bus. The walk usually felt peaceful, a moment to think, unwind, and enjoy the cool breeze after a long day. But on this particular afternoon, something felt wrong from the moment the final bell rang. The sky was darker than usual, thick clouds covering the sun in a way that made the world look grey. The wind carried an uncomfortable chill, and the path home seemed longer, emptier, and strangely silent. The student began the familiar route, passing the old playground, the abandoned shop, and the cracked sidewalk that always felt a bit eerie, even in daylight. Everything appeared normal at first, yet the air felt heavier, as though something unseen was watching from a distance. The student tried to shake off the feeling, convincing themselves that they were simply tired from school, but the uneasy sensation grew stronger with every step. The road ahead stretched out like a shadowed tunnel, and the faint sound of rustling leaves made the silence even more disturbing. As they walked past the old bus stop, the student noticed something unusual. A figure was standing there, motionless, facing the opposite direction. The shape looked human, but there was something unsettling about the way it stood so still. Almost too still. The students slowed their pace and kept their eyes on the ground, hoping to pass unnoticed. But the moment they approached, a cold shiver ran down their spine. The figure slowly turned its head, far too slowly for any normal person, revealing a pale face with empty eyes staring directly at them. Without saying a word, the figure lifted its hand and pointed straight ahead, toward the road the student needed to follow. Terrified, the student walked faster, refusing to look back. Their breathing grew unsteady as their footsteps echoed along the empty street. The feeling of being watched became unbearable. At every turn, at every shadow, it felt as if someone or something was lurking nearby. The student tried to rationalize everything, telling themselves that maybe the person was just strange or mentally unwell, but deep down they knew it was something much darker. The sense of dread was impossible to ignore. As they continued walking, the streetlights flickered even though it was only late afternoon. The faint sound of footsteps began to match their pace. Every time they sped up, the footsteps behind them did the same. The student gathered the courage to glance back, expecting to see the pale figure, but the street appeared empty. Yet the footsteps continued, clear and rhythmic, as if someone invisible was following closely behind. Panic set in, and the student began to run. Their backpack bounced against their shoulders, their shoes slapping the pavement, their breath sharp and shallow. The footsteps behind them grew louder, faster, and closer. The student turned sharply into a narrow alley, hoping to lose the presence chasing them. The alley was lined with old buildings, cracked walls, and rusted pipes. The area was normally avoided because it felt dangerous, but right now it was the only path that seemed to offer escape. As they moved deeper into the alley, the footsteps suddenly stopped. The silence hit like a punch, heavy and suffocating. The student pressed their back against the wall, trying to listen carefully through the ringing panic in their ears. For a brief moment, it felt as though whatever had been following them had vanished. But then, from behind a dumpster, a faint whisper crawled through the air. It wasn't a voice that sounded human. It was raspy, broken, and layered, like multiple tones speaking at once. The whisper repeated the same words again and again, too distorted to understand. The student froze, unable to move as fear wrapped around them like ice. Slowly, a long shadow stretched along the wall, bending unnaturally, as if the shape casting it was not bound by the limits of a normal body. The whisper grew louder, rising in intensity until it filled the entire alley. The student forced themselves to run again, sprinting toward the end of the alley as the shadow twisted behind them. Their heartbeat thundered in their chest, drowning out the whispers and the shifting sounds. They burst out of the alley and onto a crowded street where people were walking, talking, and moving as if everything was normal. The noise, the lights, and the presence of others made the haunting silence disappear instantly. The student slowed to a stop, gasping for air, drenched in cold sweat, and shaking uncontrollably. Looking back toward the alley, everything appeared ordinary. No whispers, no shadows, no pale figure, just an empty passageway leading into darkness. The student wanted to warn someone, anyone, but the words wouldn't form. They continued walking home through the safety of the crowd, but the memory of that shadow and those whispers remained etched deeply in their mind. Even now, whenever they pass the old bus stop or walk near the alley, they feel the same chill return. Sometimes, they swear they still hear faint footsteps behind them, matching their pace for just a moment before fading away. Whether it was a spirit, a shadow creature, or something beyond understanding, one thing became certain. That day proved that the walk home is not always as simple or safe as it appears, and sometimes the darkness that follows is real, silent, and waiting for the next person who walks alone.